Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Uncovering Hidden Healing. I'm your host, Arletha Lizana, and I'm thrilled to have you with us today. Before we get into our exciting topic of the day, I want to take a moment to explain why we're doing this series and what it's all about. So, as a healer and educator, I've been super fortunate to explore and learn from natural and traditional medicine practices that have deep roots in Africa and in the African diaspora. So these practices have guided me in my own healing journey, help my family and help my community and really shape, how I work with others to promote holistic health. So that's why I decided to do this series. I wanted to create a space where we can uncover and share the rich healing traditions that often remain hidden in modern healthcare conversations. So each week, we invite experts who have dedicated their lives to these healing practices to bring their wisdom and knowledge to you, our audience, really empowering you to explore these practices for your own healing, for your family, and for your communities. So today, I'm honored to introduce Vanya Francis, a certified yoga instructor, holistic health coach, holistic birth doula, and childbirth educator. Vanya is the creator behind Cherished Life and has been serving the community for over 15 years, empowering individuals through yoga, birth support, and holistic health. She's not only an expert in her field, but a loving mother of two. And her nurturing approach to maternal health is deeply rooted in her lived experience. At the heart of Vanya's philosophy lies a commitment to promoting self awareness, harmony, and holistic health. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Spelman College,
Yeah.
where she served as a yoga and meditation professor, and a Master of Arts in Communication Management from the University of Southern California. So, our topic today is a holistic approach to maternal health, perinatal care, and childbirth. Maternal health is such a vital part of community well being, and Vanya will help us explore how a holistic approach, one that addresses mind, body, and spirit, can transform the experience of childbirth and maternal care. So, grab your notebooks, grab your tea, settle in, and get ready to explore the world of holistic maternal health with us today. So, Vanya, welcome to Uncovering Hidden Healing. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today. So, before we dive into today's topic, just introduce yourself and to our audience and share a bit about your journey as a holistic health coach and birth doula.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. So you shared quite a bit about like what I do now. But my journey, I think, as a healer and what led me to birth work was kind of my own journey, personal journey, which started actually as a freshman at Spelman College. Halfway through my freshman year, I started experiencing tension headaches. I literally woke up one morning, could not stand up. I was dizzy,
Yeah.
and I had to lay back down, and it did not subside. And my RA at the time was like, "What's going on? Should I call an ambulance?
Yeah.
Are you okay?" And I was like, "I think so."
Hmm.
And so Grady, a Grady ambulance pulled up to freshman dorm at
Right.
Spelman Abbey and
Hmm.
whisked me away. And I was there for some time, some hours. They ran a lot of tests on me. And the nurse that was caring for me, said, "Honey, we think you just need to have a seat." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "There's nothing, we haven't found anything physically wrong with you." She was like, "You're stressed out."
Yeah.
And that was a huge wake up call for me. And that is kind of how I found yoga. And even during that time, none of the prescription medicines that they recommended for me were helpful. It was herbal and traditional medicines that really helped with my healing process. And so from that point, I became a yoga, really got into yoga at that time, which led me later on, many years later, to become a certified yoga instructor. And I knew coming out of my yoga teacher training, because I had had such a profound experience with prenatal yoga during my first pregnancy with my daughter, who's now 17. She's a senior. I can hardly believe it.
Wow.
But yeah, but I took prenatal yoga my entire pregnancy with her. And that experience was transformative. So I knew that I wanted to be able to support other women in that way. And so when I did my yoga teacher training, I knew immediately I wanted to support people with prenatal yoga. And the rest is kind of history. After teaching that for like 9 years or so, I thought, well, it might be nice to support folks through the birth too. I was using yoga to help them prepare for birth.
Mhm.
Then occasionally I would get asked to attend births, and so yeah, and that later I became a doula, and yeah, got into other sort of herbal traditional practices supporting women.
Wow, wow. So what a journey. Yeah. So thank you. I mean, and you've been such a strong advocate for holistic maternal care. And it's clear that this work for you is not only a profession, but a passion. So
Mm-hmm.
can you explain like what a holistic approach to maternal health means and like how
Yes,
it differs from a conventional approach to perinatal care and childbirth?
yes, I love this question because people are like, "What's a holistic birth doula? And how is that really different from, a regular doula, so to speak?" And for me, what that means is I am interested in your complete well-being, which means your mind, your body, and your spirit.
Mhm.
And so that is the approach that I take. It also incorporates the family and the partner. And we approach it not just from a physiological or biological perspective, because a lot of times there's a strong emphasis on like the physiological process of birth.
Mhm.
But I also like to emphasize the spiritual aspects of it, the emotional well being of the mother, and the ways in which we can support the entire family. So I always tell the partner when I'm working with them or mom reaches out and we first do our doula discovery call, I always say I can't and I'm not interested in doing this without your partner, whomever that may be.
Mhm.
Somebody who knows you intimately and who can speak to some of the things that I'll never know in the short time that we're working together.
Mhm.
Because while I know birth, they know you in a way that I'll never know you.
Mhm.
And then also the reliance on, natural remedies, I
Mhm.
think, for healing and for support and even for preparation for birth, which, I make an herbal organic tea that really helps to prepare the womb for birth.
Mhm.
So I think those are probably the primary things. And then the last thing I'll say is also like the aspects on the intuitive knowing,
Mhm.
which is I think a big part of African culture,
Mhm.
reliance on your ori or your intuition, and letting that lead you, and understanding that you are the expert on your body.
Right.
And I think that's what the yoga practice really helps women understand. It's like,
Uh-huh.
yes, you can defer to the doctors, and we
Mhm.
don't dismiss their
Mhm.
recommendations, but you actually are the expert on your body. So cultivating that intuitive knowing really, I think, is supportive of the holistic process.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting. And it's like, we traditionally think like the doctor knows everything about us and our body. But like you said, it's really like you do know your own body and you know your body has a healing vessel, as well. I mean, and you can, really learn to tap in, to figure
Hmm.
out like what's going on, and share those and more of a collaboration with your physician, than the
Yes.
physician telling you what needs to happen. So, that's definitely a different approach. So, Vanya, as a birth doula and holistic health coach and yoga instructor, like, so how do you integrate the practices like yoga and meditation? Like, so how does that happen with one of your clients and in the families that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So for any of my doula clients that I support, the yoga is folded into those packages. And
Mhm.
for a long time I debated that, but I was like, no, this is a really, I think, important part of this process. And it helps to prepare, like I said, your mind, your body, and your spirit for the process of birth. And I always like to use this analogy when I'm talking to folks about, thinking about birth and equating it to a marathon, because most people can kind of visualize what it might mean to run a 26-mile race. And I always say, but you wouldn't show up to a marathon just having read about it or talked about it, right? It's like you're going to first, it begins with, do I believe I can even run
Right.
26 miles, right? So,
Yes.
do I even believe that my body is capable of giving birth to my baby, without any unnecessary support?
Mhm.
And then, in addition to the physical conditioning that takes place with preparing for a marathon, there's also a mental conditioning and emotional conditioning that goes along with preparing to run 26 miles. And so I say birth is the same thing. And so yoga, I think, allows people to prepare physically. So it's getting mama all the way together in terms of like her hips and the hip mobility, pelvic mobility, the strength needed. Because I always say you're going to have a lot of accoutrements, carrying this baby. You got your stroller, your fancy
Right.
strollers,
All
and
the things, the
car
bag, everything.
seats.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of those things. So There is obviously that physical conditioning with the stretching and the strengthening, but then there's a mental, emotional conditioning as well. One of the most important parts being the meditative piece that you mentioned, and folks getting really still and being with themselves. And a lot of women will say the hardest part about yoga is doing nothing. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, well, come on then, because that's
Yeah.
exactly what you need is to do nothing.
Yep.
And you want to practice because you come face to face with yourself in birth.
Hmm.
And you want to practice spending time with yourself and with your baby before what feels like a lot of chaos in your body. And so you need to get still enough, and it's a practice, and
Hmm.
practice being with yourself and accessing that place so that you can go to that place once you're giving
Right.
birth.
That's
And
correct.
you do it anyway. I mean, you
Yeah.
eventually have to surrender to that place anyway. But if you've had an opportunity to experience it or tap into it
Mhm.
prior to giving birth, then it helps so much, with the birth outcome, I think. So it's an
Absolutely.
important part of the process. And then sometimes I'll do guided meditations with, the mama and the partner or, whoever her partner may be. So, because again, we're really I like to cultivate that union and elevate the union between mother and her partner.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've had like three daughters, and each of their birth stories is like totally different. Like,
Yeah.
so the first one, I think that I really didn't have an awareness of my own body and really confidence. Like, like I was just there. I
Yeah.
mean, it happened. It was a natural birth. She's beautiful, she's healthy, she's here. All the things, right? She's old
Yeah.
now. I don't know if she want me to tell her age, but she's 30. Okay, so then so then the second one, she was actually born in an ambulance. Well, again, funny story is because I knew I was having her. I had a midwife. I went to the hospital and I was like, I'm having her. And they're like, no, you're not. Go home. Went home, couldn't make it back, right? Because I knew, yeah.
Wow.
So I had her in an ambulance. But the funny thing is, I was holding her in. And then something said to me, women have been doing this for millions of years. So you can do this. And
Yes.
I just let go. And so when you just spoke about letting go,
Yes.
and just like being still, all of the things you just said, I was
Yes.
like, I remember when that happened for me, but it wasn't on the first birth. It was the second
Yes.
birth. And then the third birth was again still different. So, it's just really, I think it's an awesome, approach that you have to really
Mhm.
help women feel, comfortable and confident and really help us learn how to be still because we don't know how to do that sometimes.
Yeah. It's a very foreign
Yeah,
concept for
it
many
is.
of us because I think we live in a society that glorifies multitasking. And
That's
so
right.
the thought of like just like focusing on one thing and
Right.
it being myself, it's like very foreign to most people. And I've even asked, one of the questions I ask and exercises that we work through
Mhm.
when I'm working with clients is, what does it take or what do you think it will take for you to lose it in labor? And by
Mhm.
lose it, I don't mean like go
Mhm.
crazy, but what will it take for you to be uninhibited while
Yeah.
you're birthing? Not on your phone, not worried about what's going on in your house or all these things, but really present so that you can be vulnerable and drop in. And a
Mhm.
lot of folks are like, I don't even know what that means. Like,
Exactly.
what do you
Like
mean? Like, I'm always in control of everything.
everything
So,
all the time.
the, yeah, so the thought I'm not is like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, this is a good time to start thinking about it?
Oh my God, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, with the first daughter, like the labor was extra long because you're gonna laugh. I was holding it in because I was like, I'm gonna have to boo-boo on this table. And I'm embarrassed and I don't want to boo-boo on this table. So
Table.
finally I was like, she was like, if you have to just let it go, it'll be okay.
Yes.
Like people do this all the time. And then when I
Yes.
did, it wasn't boo-boo, it was her.
It was her. It was her head. I
So
know.
again, so
Wow.
it's like, like you said, really just helping women kind of understand that. But, let's talk about this. Some people may be new to the idea of working with a doula. So can you
Yes.
explain the role of a birth doula and like how working with a doula supports emotional and physical well-being?
Yeah, no, I love it. So doulas, succinctly put, help to provide emotional support,
Hmm.
physical comfort. I like to add to that education. I'm really big on childbirth education and advocacy in your birthing space. And so I always say, think of us as your continuity of care. We do not perform any clinical tasks, right? So we don't do, technically, it's out of our scope of practice to do blood pressure checks or check the fetal heart tones or draw blood or any of those things. We really are there for the emotional and physical support. And but we can be that continuity of care. So if you're seeing a midwife or an OB, and let's say you plan for a home birth and you're under midwife care, planning for that home birth, but then something happens and you need to be transferred to a hospital. Oftentimes, that home birth midwife will transfer care to an OB or the hospital, but the doula is with the family the entire
Mhm.
time.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
we will go from the home to the hospital with our clients and be there through the entire birth experience.
Nice. Okay.
Similarly, like in a hospital setting, shifts change. You have a nurse for 12 hours, and somebody else comes on, and there's another person that's taking
Yeah.
care of you for 12 hours. And
Mhm.
typically, with the doula, we are there with you throughout that entire time. I mean, reasonably speaking.
Mhm.
Sometimes, because I always say we're human too, so we might have to take a little break. But I think that kind of summarizes, the difference between like a doula versus like a midwife or doctor.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, so my next question is like, there are, of course, we know about the health disparities that, women of color face during
Hmm.
pregnancy and childbirth. So, like, what are some of the benefits of adopting like this holistic approach and, having a doula specifically for women of color, who face these disparities?
Absolutely. So you're in a very vulnerable position. And we know that as Black women and Black birthing people, the assumption has been that we don't feel pain in the way other people
Yes.
feel it,
Yes.
or we just haven't been taken as seriously in the clinical space for whatever reason, or we haven't been heard. We haven't been seen and we haven't been heard. And so a doula is that person. And I've often heard other families say, you were that objective presence, that could really advocate for us and help us think through some very critical decisions,
Mhm.
that we otherwise may not have been able to do in our best interest because we felt like we were feeling pressure and
Right.
influence from the hospital staff.
Mhm.
So a doula can, has been there, and I think it's so important to help you advocate for yourself. And really, I say, teaching you to advocate for yourself, right?
Yeah.
We don't necessarily do the advocacy ourselves,
Mhm.
teaching you, educating you on how to advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
And then also being, so hopefully, that objective, informed approach to a lot of the things that are happening in that space. Because there's so many different things coming at you, so
Mhm.
many really important decisions that need to be made. And oftentimes you're dealing with these things for the very first time.
Mhm.
So a doula can be the one to help you sift through, frankly, some of the BS, because they're
Yeah.
going to tell you a whole lot of stuff because it's very fear-based,
Yes, I was gonna say
fear-driven.
yes. It's about the
Yeah,
scaring you. Everything is scary. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, and they have their agenda and their interests, which is, they have policies and procedures and things that they have to abide by, which we respect. But then the doula can be there to help you center yourself, right?
Mhm.
A doula helps to center the birthing person and center the family and
Mhm.
make sure that they are, the decisions that are being made are in their best interest.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense. So thank you. So let's talk about the connection between herbal remedies and maternal health. So as a part
Hmm.
of your holistic practices, you create herbal organic teas. So tell us more about how your herbal remedies and others that you know of support women through pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum.
Yeah, there's so many things, so many conditions that
Mhm.
arise that are pregnancy specific. And
Mhm.
so herbs and natural supplements and things can be an incredible boon for women in labor, especially when, and I always say, if at no other time in a woman or a birthing person's life, a pregnant person's life, if at no other time, pregnancy is typically the time when they are most concerned with what's going into their
Yes.
body and taking care of themselves and what's going to be best for their babies. And
Mhm.
so those natural remedies can help with, edema. And so just to speak specifically about my teas, which I developed during my second pregnancy with my son, who will be 8 in November.
Mhm.
And I started steeping herbs and I created this tea because I couldn't take prenatal vitamins. They didn't agree with me.
Yeah.
And I
And
had
they're
two
giant
home,
too. They're like this.
yeah, and not like, yeah, and they make you feel crazy, some of them. And so I tried all sorts of brands and all types. I did the pills, I did the liquid, and I just could not stomach them. And at the recommendation of my midwife at the time, she suggested that I start steeping herbs. And I had always been into like holistic practices and holistic health. So I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And so she recommended, which many people I think in the birth world are familiar with, Nora tea. And Nora is an acronym for the herbs in that are nettle, oat straw, red raspberry leaf, and alfalfa. And so that combination of herbs is thought to be like, a quintessential combination for a pregnant woman. It helps, the red raspberry leaves helps to tone the uterus in preparation for birth. And then the other ones are just, it's a whole host of nutrients and things that really support a healthy pregnancy. So I started doing that. But then as a holistic health coach, I got really excited about sharing it, with my yoga students at the time because I wasn't yet a practicing doula. And I was like, this is what y'all need to do. And then they were like, well, how about you just do that for us? And I
Right.
was like,
Right. Because we don't have time for this, right?
right. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I've always been interested in making healthy things very palatable and delicious
Yeah.
and, accessible to people because, if it tastes good, people will do it more
Right.
often than not.
Yeah.
So I started experimenting with flavors and I knew that I wanted it to be sugar free and caffeine free. And so eventually developed this formula. I added a couple other herbs to it. And what I found is that it really supports a healthy pregnancy, kind of like from start to finish. So it aids in nausea, nausea and um, insomnia and things like, well, not insomnia in the first trimester, but kind of towards the end of the pregnancy, it can be really helpful for that. Again, I mentioned toning and preparing the uterus for birth. It helps with edema and swelling. So I found that it really has become like this tonic. It's an herbal tea infusion. It steeps for a while. And then I was like, well, I'm going to bottle this and make it readily available for folks because wouldn't it be nice to just open up a bottle and pop off the top and be able to drink something and have it taste good? So, so that I think those are some of the ways that herbs can really be supportive of your pregnancy.
Okay, great, great. Yeah. So, what's one of the most memorable experiences you've had working with a client where holistic care made a significant difference in their childbirth experience?
Yeah, so I'm going to go to just one recently who had a very strong yoga practice. And she, was planning an unmedicated birth. And I had suggested that we bring the yoga mat and the birthing ball to the hospital because oftentimes in the hospital room, the bed is like the centerpiece, and nobody wants to be on the hospital floor.
Yes, you're right.
So it can get really tricky, and there isn't a lot of room to move around.
Mhm.
And so, though, like that birth ball and that yoga mat are my go-to in order for folks to continue to be able to engage in movement while birthing, which really helps to bring the baby down, helps
Mhm.
to open up the hips and all those things. So so we rolled her yoga mat out. She had her yoga blocks and she was able to assume a lot of different positions to kind
Yeah.
of help her bring her baby down and really move through a lot of the sensations that she was experiencing. That otherwise I think would have been really, really difficult for her. And so, for me, the movement and her practice and her ability to sort of just tap in and use her breath and really access a meditative state while birthing, it was profound. And she did it in a way. I think that experience really showed me like the power of practice and how you can really use it. You can use it as a tool while birthing. And just another little quick story. Just reflecting on my own birth. I'll never forget. I was day 5 on my birthing journey because I labored with my daughter for 5 days, and I was out here, as the contractions were coming, and then my midwife and partner was like, Vanya, you got to use your tools. Like you've done this hypnobirthing and this yoga and all these other things. You really have to tap in and use some of these tools. And that was a shift for me. And in that moment, I was like, you're right. Connected with my breath, got in a really meditative state, and literally started to reimagine the sensations that I was experiencing in my body. They were no longer painful, which I know probably sounds crazy to some
No, it
people,
doesn't.
but
No, it doesn't. It sounds crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
but really true. So it's really
Mhm.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is super powerful. And it's like, really that your thoughts dictate a lot and we don't really
Hmm.
realize that, and so many things that you spoke about, but just being able to have tools and then connect with the tool, like, oh yeah, I do have tools for
Yeah.
this, there, I can get through this. I'm ready for this, like you said. So I mean, I think that that's really kind of just, awesome, those two examples that you gave. So like, what advice would you give for young women who are planning to have children and some that may not even be planning to have children and the
Yeah.
children will come? It's like, what should they be doing to prepare themselves, mind, body, and spirit,
Yes.
for, for being a mother, like what
Yeah.
should they do? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things I'll say is if you can begin to prepare now prior to pregnancy, I mean, any time is a great time to, I think, adopt a holistic lifestyle and start taking really good care of yourself. But, from a traditional African standpoint, preparing your body, for pregnancy with nutrition and certain herbs are, practices that we've had for centuries. And so, I suggest really adopting a whole foods diet, even,
Mhm.
just trying to eliminate some of the processed foods in your diet can be really helpful.
Mhm.
Um, Caffeine and alcohol are two of the greatest culprits when I think it comes to infertility in our society. There's so many factors that contribute to it. But I think being conscious of and maybe even limiting caffeine consumption and alcohol consumption
Mhm.
in preparation for pregnancy can be extremely helpful. And then movement, right? Just, and movement that you enjoy too can be is I think really critical because as we've talked about, it's like running a marathon. So, and you want to start preparing now for that marathon,
Okay.
and then lastly, I would say really slowing down.
Mhm.
And I always talk to folks about your baby needs a soft place to land,
Mhm.
and when you can start to manage your energy and find practices that support your overall well-being, that becomes an invitation to welcome your child to
Mhm.
this world. It sends a signal to, whatever higher power you might believe in and whatever you know that entity to be.
Mhm.
It says to the universe, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to receive this child and I'm making space for this
Mhm.
child. And
Mhm.
people don't always understand or think about that energetic component, which is really, really important, I think,
Mhm.
when preparing your body for birth.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. I remember like before I was even trying to have children, one of my aunts who had 11 children, she was like, "You need to start walking," and I was like, "What is she talking about?" And she was like, "You need to walk a lot, as a young woman." And I was just like,
Hmm.
but then when I was like, "Oh,
Yes.
like I get it," what she was trying to say in terms of like getting my body prepared. So it was
Hmm.
interesting. I was not trying to hear that at the time,
Yeah.
interesting. But I'm going to open the floor for questions from our audience. But while we're waiting for those questions, I had a
Mhm.
question really just about like how do you believe that your practice and what you've learned, in the modern world really connect with our ancestors. We know we had a lot of ancestors who were midwives because they had to be,
Hmm.
or really strong, especially here in Georgia, strong midwife tradition for Black women. And then, of course, even in Africa, traditional birth attendants and so forth. So how do you feel like, maybe some parts of your practice kind of connect, to our ancestral traditions in maternal health?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think one of the exercises that I often like to take my clients through it's an intimacy assessment. But what that allows me to do is sort of assess their perceptions of pain and fear.
Hmm.
And I get to hear from their client. And this was actually a tool developed by my mentor, Shakana Haley. So I'm gonna shout her out because she's amazing. Um, but it allows me to understand their perceptions of pain and fear and also come to understand them on a deeper level. And a lot of times with that assessment, it allows me to understand like even their relationship to their mother or their
Hmm.
mother's mother in preparing for their mothering or birthing journey. And we realize that that becomes so important because a lot of those things end up coming up and out in the birthing space anyway.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the sooner we can begin to process through some of those things on the front end, because usually I'm with folks for at least 3 or 4 months in preparation for their birth, the more important that becomes. And I always tell folks, and oftentimes I will host a mother's blessing for my clients. And within that circle, and it is a ceremony, if you will, that's done for mothers to bless and prepare their entry into motherhood. And oftentimes it is done with a group, an intimate group of folks, no more than 10 or so of their friends.
Mhm.
But we will ask folks to go around and introduce themselves by honoring or acknowledging their maternal ancestry.
Yeah.
And the reason we do that, and the reason why a lot of times I'll, ask folks to share that is because it's important for that mother, that birthing person to know that she stands on the
Mhm.
shoulders of hundreds of thousands of women who have come before her and
Mhm.
birthed before her.
Mhm.
And that in that way, she understands like I'm not alone. And for
Exactly.
me, that was like a powerful thought. Like I'm like,
Mhm.
well, if they did it and women have been doing
That's
this
what
for
yeah.
hundreds of thousands of
Mhm.
years,
It's like I can
I
do
can
this.
do it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
Mhm.
certainly do it too. So
Mhm.
I think that's one of the ways that I really like to integrate that element into my
Mhm.
practice. Yeah,
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's like so powerful. I always think like, you heard like you were inside your mother who was inside your grandmother, as an ex. So that always bugs me out. Like, wow,
Yeah.
I was really around, for that birthing process of my mother in a way. So it's kind of like,
Yes.
yeah. So all of that like concept of really just thinking about your maternal ancestors. And like you said, they had to, give birth because I'm here,
Yeah.
type of thing. So that realization is super strong. So, I mean, we have a couple of questions, so I'll just start in with those.
Okay. Okay.
And so one is, what do you recommend or any advice you have to prepare for pregnancy after miscarriage?
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a great question. So, and it's kind of hard for me to answer that because I think the circumstances surrounding the miscarriage have a
Mhm.
lot to do with that. And I'm wondering if this person is asking about like physical preparation.
I
But
think
what
both.
my
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, yeah, because what my
mhm,
mind goes to is also sort of just like energetic healing
mhm,
and processing through that experience so that you can open yourself up to, the next pregnancy. And obviously, I mean, mental health is so important. So I absolutely recommend connecting with like a mental health specialist that can kind
mhm,
of sort of help you process through some of those things. I think we, as doulas, so I'm a birth doula, but we
mhm,
also have doulas that specialize, in abortions and loss and
mhm,
grief and all of that. So even connecting with a doula who kind of specializes in loss could be
mhm,
really helpful for somebody
mhm,
at this time. And then, we never know, or we don't always know the reasons behind a miscarriage. But I think
mhm,
some of the things that I shared in terms of just the regular things that you would do to prepare your body
mhm,
for a pregnancy, like taking really good care of yourself from an emotional, a spiritual, a physical,
mhm,
perspective becomes really important. So, whatever those activities are that bring you joy, but that also help to strengthen your body, your mind, and your spirit. I highly recommend you incorporating those into your life on a
mhm,
regular basis, paying close attention to your diet.
mhm.
And the one thing I'll say about diet, because it can get really tricky these days, is I typically recommend an anti-inflammatory diet. And
Mhm,
we
mhm,
don't really have a lot of, enough time to kind of go into all the specifics of that, but foods like processed foods cause inflammation for some folks,
mhm, mhm,
wheat and dairy and things
mhm,
of that nature. But the reason why I focus specifically on that versus vegan, vegetarian,
mhm,
and I do advocate for a plant-based diet
mhm,
in general, whatever it is, right? So everything in moderation, but anti-inflammatory becomes so important because inflammation becomes a breeding ground for disease or disease in the body.
mhm.
And so if there's anything else going on, any other complications, we don't want inflammation present contributing to that.
Okay.
And then also inflammation increases your receptivity to pain.
Mhm.
And so I think, especially when we're thinking about further down the line, preparing for birth, you don't want anything that's going to increase your receptivity to pain. So,
Mhm.
but practices like yoga,
Mm.
and I'm on the yoga tip,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think can be, really helpful for all of that. So I hope that answers the question
No,
just a
no, I
little
think that
bit.
was really good. Thank you. Thank you. So the
Yeah.
next question is maternal health and the dangers of birthing have been in a lot of the news lately. Do you have advice for women who may not have access to a doula on how to advocate for yourself and not be afraid?
Yeah. So truthfully, I ended up having someone serving as a doula at my birth, but she was really my midwife's assistant.
Mhm.
And so I didn't have a doula, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
When I gave birth to my daughter, 16, 17 years ago. And one of the things I really want to encourage folks to do is to begin to educate yourself. Just having, because I think with information, and when I say educate, I'm not talking about Instagram and TikTok
Yeah.
because that will make you spiral out of control.
Yeah. It's like
But
yeah.
yeah, there are a few resources out there that I think can help you get in a state of mind where you are cultivating a belief in your body's
Yeah.
ability to birth your child.
Yeah.
That was the most powerful thing that
Mm.
I did in preparation for my birth.
Yeah.
I mentioned I had a home birth. I didn't know anybody who was
Yeah.
birthing at home, and my family thought I was crazy, and I had never even considered it either.
Yeah.
But the more I read about the challenges that can present themselves in the clinical setting, and the more I read about all of these amazing
Yeah.
experiences
Yeah.
from women who had birth, had these unmedicated births and sort of these out of body experiences, I was like, maybe I can do that too.
Yeah.
And so my one piece of advice would be to seek out positive birth stories and
Mhm.
seek out information that is supportive of you and your knowing that your body is perfectly designed to birth your baby, and
Yeah.
stay off of Instagram and TikTok.
Exactly. 'Cause no, it is. Sometimes it's like really scary. It's triggering. So,
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that, and then just like, for my own birth story, I did start doing some research and, my mom talked about having an epidural. Like, so this is in
Hmm.
the 60s and how terrible it was and how her back, she still tells me today, my mom's 80 something. She'll like, my back still hurts from when I had the epidural when I had you. I'm like, really, mom?
Wow.
So,
Wow.
but it's like, I knew I did. That's one thing. I'm like, I don't want to have an epidural. Right.
Yeah.
Unless I just absolutely have to, if it's medically
Hmm.
necessary, whatever, but I don't have an epidural. So, I worked with, like my midwife, and coaches
Hmm.
really just to, figure out some breathing techniques and things like that. So all three of the births were natural. I mean, I got close to the point where I was about to ask for it, but,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, but I made it through. But I think just kind of educating also on, like how you want your birth to go, like,
Yes.
and how you want to be on the other side of that, even as a woman, So I
Yes.
think that was also, yeah, helpful. So we have a
It's
few more
huge.
questions. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Yeah. So here we go. Okay. So there are many methods of birthing. And here in
Hmm.
America, that's mostly happens laying down. How can we bring in more alternative or traditional birthing methods?
I think that's a great question. And it is really challenging. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. It is so challenging in the clinical setting to birth freely, frankly. I use the analogy of, if you're thinking about, especially if you're wanting an unmedicated birth,
Mm,
right? Some women are very clear, like, I'm not trying to do that. That's not for me. I know myself and I would prefer not to do that, right? But for those who are wanting that unmedicated birth, movement and being upright and benefiting from gravity becomes so important to that process. And
mm,
so I think staying at home as long as you can, because what you should understand is when you enter that clinical space,
mhm.
there's going to be a lot of back and forth about what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
And if you think about a horse that's wild and free and roaming in its natural habitat, its natural environment,
Mm,
right? And then versus a horse that is tethered, right? It's got on its harness and it can't move as freely and it's in a closed in space.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the way I think about birth. Like, if you can stay at home for as long as possible, you're in your natural habitat, you can roam freely, you're in the comfort of your own home versus entering that clinical space where you are tethered typically in no less than 5 ways.
Yeah.
You have something, you have your contraction monitor, the baby's heart monitor, a blood pressure cuff, a lot of times an oxygen monitor, and then an IV lock, an IV. And
Mhm.
so, this idea of being able to move freely and birth upright becomes really challenging. And like I said, the bed is a centerpiece of that situation. So a lot of women end up just kind of laying down and succumbing to that experience. And so I would love to say, that it would just be great if you could continue to move about. We could incorporate more birthing stools, but it is a negotiation, I think, in that space. So, if you know that that is what you desire, and we know that that is actually what is best for a birthing person, is to be able to move and to be upright and take advantage of gravity,
Mhm.
staying at home for as much as possible in that early labor phase, and
Mhm.
then just get into the hospital, when you're active and ready, almost ready to give birth, would be
Mhm.
my advice. I've supported folks in both home settings and clinical settings, and you just need to understand what you're walking into, I think, in the clinical setting.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep. Good. Okay. Next one. How can dads participate more in the process and maximize support?
I love this. And I one of the parts of my holistic practice is, I think I had mentioned, the partnership with the partner. And I like to use the analogy of, like a triangle, where I see the birthing person sitting at the top of that, or at the apex of that triangle, and me and the partner holding down the foundation. And I always say, because while I know birth, you know your partner better than I ever will in the short time that we're working together. And so, one of the ways that I like to bring in the partner, and I'm assuming and hoping that other doulas are doing the same, is it is a requirement for your partner to be at all of our prenatal sessions. So I do at least three prenatal sessions with all of my families. And if for some reason your partner can't be there, then we'll have to reschedule,
Mhm.
because they're an integral part of this process, and they help contribute to mom's feelings of well-being, of safety and security. And even if they're like, I'm not quite sure how to support, I'm like, I got you. We got a birth partner guide. We have a lot of things that we can do to help you, sort of, to help make sure that you're a part, an integral part of this process.
Mhm.
Because really, I like to step back a lot of times, when dads and partners are really involved. Because a lot of times mom is looking to their partner for that safety, that security, and that reassurance throughout the
Mhm.
process. So
Mhm.
I can't
Absolutely.
speak for everybody, but that's
No,
how I
no,
like
I
to
think
do
that,
it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I love that. And the incorporation of the dads, and even the incorporation of the families,
Yeah,
extended
absolutely.
family.
Grandmas and sisters. Now that COVID, I mean, well,
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm. Yeah.
But hospitals have opened back up a little bit
Yes.
more. And so
Mhm.
recently I've, been in a birthing space with grandmas and,
Mhm.
aunties, and that's been really beautiful
Oh,
too.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think this the last question I have. So, what is the future of holistic maternal health like, and how
Mm.
can we make these practices more accessible to all women?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I am so happy to see that doulas are being recognized and
Yeah,
seen as an important
it was
part
a fight.
of,
I'm gonna tell you.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But now, folks, I think hospitals, doctors, everybody's saying no, they're an integral part of this birthing team.
Mhm.
And so, with regard to the future, I want to shout out WellStar hospitals. I know they've just actually, no, Morehouse School of Medicine too,
Yeah,
even though I haven't had
yeah,
a chance.
I
I
was
was gonna
actually gonna
say,
mention, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
their program.
because I
So
know you all. Yeah, please
yes,
do
I
that.
did
Yeah.
I wrote the curriculum for, it's our maternal health, perinatal navigators. So I wrote the
Navigators, yes.
yeah, I wrote
Yeah.
the curriculum for us. I did a training, and then Dr. Hernandez actually trains, doulas. But it's funny. I've been at Morehouse School of Medicine 10 years, and I started with that when I came in, and they're like, "What doulas?" Like, so just to see it get to this point, and like you
Yeah.
said, well, start. And I got a call from Emory the other day, and they're like, "We're trying to train doulas and navigators and community health workers in the maternal health space." I was like, "What?" And they said they like
Yeah.
wanted to train 100. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So, like you said, it's just come a long way. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, because I think it's beautiful. And the reason why I was mentioning that particular program is because I was recently become a part of that doula team. And what I think is brilliant is that hospitals are now paying for doulas,
Yes,
for clients to have
finally.
doulas,
Yeah.
so it's not such a hardship. I think to address one of the questions that we had previously, if
Mhm.
you can't afford a doula, that should not limit your access to a doula.
That's right.
And I think, all the hospitals and I think the medical world is starting to recognize that, and I'm so appreciative of those efforts. Yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So Vanya, it's been such a joy having you on our show today. I mean, like your
Likewise.
knowledge and passion, like this holistic maternal health is like so inspiring. I get so excited. You see, I'm like sharing my own
Yeah.
story. Like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I actually, and before we started talking, I was like, oh yeah, I'm a mom. I've been through
Yeah.
some of these stories. So a lot of things that you were saying really resonated with me, and I'm sure with our audience. I mean, it's been great. So I mean, before we close, like how can our viewers connect with you? What do you do? Tell us,
Yeah.
everything that we need to know.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, you can find me online. Obviously, my website is probably one of the best places to get in touch with me. And that address is my cherished with an ed life.com, mycherishedlife.com. But I'm also on Instagram as Cherished Life Wellness, and also on Facebook as Cherished Life. So you can definitely connect with me in all of those places. I still have my private doula practice, and those spaces are filling up. So, I love connecting with people through doula discovery calls, prenatal yoga. I offer not just classes, and we're actually getting ready to launch a bunch of new classes in the next couple of weeks, pre and postnatal classes.
Mhm.
But I also offer a holistic prenatal yoga teacher training.
Okay.
And that training is open to not just yoga instructors, but also birth professionals.
Nice.
Because
Yeah.
what I realized about what I do, and the success that I've had in that space is I'm not that I'm such, I mean, I am a good yoga teacher, but really what coupled with my passion for birth, and pregnancy is really what makes it, I
Mhm.
think, really special and welcoming for a lot of folks. So I'm
That's
teaching
right.
other folks how to do the same thing. Yeah, and then teas. If you need some teas, y'all, I say they're for periods, pregnancy, and postpartum. Cherished
Okay.
tea.
The peas. Okay, that's right.
Yes,
Okay.
periods, pregnancy, and postpartum. People like, you got anything for menopause? I'm like, not yet, but I'm
Okay,
working
look,
on
I'm
it.
asking for that. That was gonna be next. Okay, so make up the next
Yeah.
tea for menopausal people. Yes.
Yeah, so working on that. But yeah, and all of that information can be found on my website.
Oh yeah, I love that. And really, I really wish that I know like you're just so vibrant. I mean, and just so
Oh,
knowledgeable and just so like warm. I really wish you had a TV show that really talked about. There used to be a show a long
oh,
time ago on TLC. There was this
uh-huh.
show that was like about birthing and pregnant moms, and it was so scary. But I used to watch it when I was pregnant, like and I was scared, like, is this gonna happen? I would love for you to have like a show that really kind of
So,
just shows, like,
okay, Alisa.
how birthing can be a great experience and we don't have to be frightened. Because I think a lot
Yeah,
of Black women are like super frightened right now.
frightening.
So,
Yeah,
I
I
would love
agree.
for you to have a show or, something
Well,
like
thank
that.
you for putting that deposit in the
Put it out
universe. We're
there
gonna
in the
see, we're
universe.
gonna see what manifests.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Yeah. So to our viewers, I just want to remind you about our African and African diaspora natural and traditional medicine certificate program. Our next cohort starts in January. Payments are due in December. We have payment plans and the like. Also, don't forget our upcoming natural medicine trip to Brazil, December 6th through 14th. This is the very last chance to join us in December. So this is it. So if you're getting on board, you got to get on board now. And really just thank you all for joining us today on Uncovering Hidden Healing. So be sure to tune in next Sunday for another enlightening conversation. Until then, stay curious, stay healthy, and keep exploring the wonders of natural and traditional medicine. And goodbye for now. Have a great Sunday.